Here we have the Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee chairwoman basically saying that the Supreme Court's Louisiana ruling that finally ended racial gerrymandering is somehow a quote unquote sad day for democracy. Let's take a look.
It's appalling. It's a sad day for our democracy. And, Congress put that law in place. So if we thought that it needed to be changed, Congress should be the one to change it, not a court trying to change it on their own. I do.
Okay. I don't mean to stop the video so early, but what she said here is just appalling. She does not know what she's talking about. Congress can change the laws that they set. That is very much true. However, if Congress makes an unconstitutional law and if it's challenged, then the Supreme Court has not only the right, but the duty and obligation to change that law. The Supreme Court is acting as a check to the executive and to the legislative branch. If they overstep, if any of those branches overstep, the court has a duty and right to, protect the American people from that, from them overstepping it. Number one. Number two, the fact that she's even alluding to the fact that the Supreme Court is somehow acting in a nefarious way or acting through judicial activism is extremely funny here because what the left has done, what the left continues to push, is a judicial activism type Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court makes decisions that they believe are best for the American people. The left wants the Supreme Court to be 9 kings rather than 9 Supreme Court justices that are bound by the Constitution. And she's alluding to the fact that they're somehow in here performing judicial activism when really the only judicial activism being performed at the Supreme Court level or at any court level is by the left.
To think that this is judicial overreach and is a sad day for our country. We need to make sure that we are upholding the incredible accomplishments of the Voting Rights Act. We need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to continue to move forward and continue to make sure we have fair representation all across the country. But let's be clear, they know what they want to do. Republicans are losing. They're losing across the country. So they want to rig the system so they have a chance of winning. Now, they could actually listen to people and maybe find out that their policies are not popular and try to win over the hearts and minds of the American people. But instead, they're trying to change maps. And that's why you see them trying to respond so aggressively and
Okay, so there's two ways we have to look at this ruling by the Supreme Court. There's a legal way and there's a political way. Politically speaking, obviously, the Supreme Court ruling to finally end racial gerrymandering benefits Republicans because the only people racially gerrymandering are the Democrats. They gerrymander based off minority groups, which is, racial gerrymandering. What what she is not explaining, though, is that there's two ways to look at this. There's a legal way, too, a constitutional way, and how the Supreme Court looks at it is through that legal way, through the constitutional way, whether racial gerrymandering is legal in the first place. They obviously established that no, it is not. It's something that has been a precedent for a long time since, Xavi Reno. So I don't understand her disconnect. She might not like the outcome of the ruling, but it was the correct ruling. I said the same thing with the Supreme Court tariffs, where even though I am a big supporter of Trump's tariffs, the Supreme Court ruled correctly in preventing the tariffs through the specific clause that the Trump administration was using on Trump. So just because the political outcome is not ideal for your party does not mean you have to be against it. And clearly she can't admit that.
frankly, why you saw, even in the Supreme Court, that such a strong dissent from the three judges who had the dissenting opinion, because they really were attacking the fundamental premise of the Voting Rights Act and, of course, of Section 2.
Again, I'm sorry for pausing this often, but she just does not know what she's talking about. If you read the dissent goes into detail of the effects or the potential effects of the Voting Rights Act being revoked, meaning that if we rule this way, the potential effects on society will be this way. When the Supreme Court rules, their job is not to rule based off the potential effects their ruling has. Their job is to base their rulings mostly off the Constitution and whether it's constitutional. So that's something that the justices did not uphold in this case, or the liberal justices did not uphold. And for the conservative justices that are like Amy Coney Barrett, that are not very conservative, not very staunchly conservative, the ones that are too afraid to overturn precedent, those justices even sided with the, more conservative Clarence Thomas type justices because they understood that the effects here are very minimal. The effects of the overturning of the Voting Rights Act in this case would be extremely minimal compared to the benefit of actually having something constitutional here.
Well, and in addition to state-based VRAs, the legislation that bears John Lewis's name, it's also forced Democrats into the position of considering what it is going to look like to go on offense. This is some new reporting from Politico. Some Democrats in the immediate aftermath of the Calais ruling raised the possibility of diluting majority-minority districts to help draw more seats favoring Democrats. Even in states like California, where the party already stands to gain up to 5 seats after voters approved a new congressional map last fall. Diluting majority-minority districts is still complicated, as you well know. I wonder, can you tell us what the conversations are that are happening inside your caucus about the pros and the cons of such an approach?
Well, let's look at where we're at first today, because when Trump asked Texas to give him 5 more seats and they said, yes, sir, they drew a map that did not go to the people. They drew a map and put it in place. And they should be careful what they ask for, because we actually have opportunities to pick up seats, even with their new map in Texas. But in California, in the response, the people got the chance to have a say. The people voted and felt very strongly that they wanted to make sure they stood up for fair representation and not let a state like Texas take away their representation in Congress. You saw the same for the people of Virginia, stand up and vote. You're going to see states across the country, and definitely blue states, respond to Republicans' attempts to take away all of our rights by trying to lock in a permanent Republican majority. Folks are going to stand up, and I think it's been a clear through line all along that we have gone to the people, and the people have voted. You notice Republicans are not talking about ever going to the people. The governor of Tennessee didn't say they were going to ask voters if they wanted to change their maps. They are pushing forward, and frankly, people...
This is such a useless point. The reason why California went through the people in the first place was because it had to. It's in the Constitution that anytime, the independent commission is not drawing the maps and it's drawn by the legislative branch in California, then it has to be done by the people. And this is not, realistically speaking, if any of these states went to the people, the maps would not be different. The only state that actually decided to go to the people where the outcome was different was in Virginia, where 49% of Virginians did not want this map to be redrawn, while 51% did. And, that just goes to show how big of an effect the Democrats are having in their gerrymandering and redistricting. Because when we look at states that are extremely red or extremely blue, like Texas or California, the representation is not shifting that much. It's shifting a little bit. There's going to be less representation of the minority party in those states, but nothing compared to states like Virginia, where we're now going to have only one Republican seat in a state that constantly votes either a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. In the last election, presidential election, Virginia went for Trump. In the last gubernatorial election, for governor, obviously, Virginia went to the Democrats. So a swing state like Virginia should not be gerrymandered to the point where there's only one seat of representation, because that's not representing the Republican Party of Virginia. That's not representing the people of Virginia. So it's a fundamental difference between the Democrats and the Republicans that Republicans continue to try and twist institutions, to try and break down the very institutions that make our country great, whether it's representation in Congress or even if it's the fact that we are based off a meritocracy. We're based off a system that doesn't account for race anymore in our country. So Democrats constantly try to undermine these institutions for the benefit of their political party. That's why, there's such a big fundamental difference between the gerrymandering that Republicans are doing and the gerrymandering that Democrats are doing. I'm not for gerrymandering on any side, but if it is going to be done, it should be done without undermining the very institutions that made our country great.
Across the country hate this.
Congresswoman, just a few days ago, it feels like, I think it was last week, when Virginia voters passed their map and said, yes, please go ahead and do this. You had Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, the man who leads your chamber. He was aghast. He couldn't believe that Democrats would do something like this. But I want you to listen to what he said on Thursday after the Supreme Court ruling.
the Supreme Court said that in Louisiana's case, it was blatantly unconstitutional. And I think that principle applies probably in other states as well. We want constitutional maps. I don't think that's a controversial notion. And I think all states who have unconstitutional maps should look at that very carefully. And I think they should do it before the midterm.
Yeah.
The speaker's a very smart man. I think he knows that the controversial notion has nothing to do with people not wanting constitutional maps. Everyone wants that, right? That's running in Congress, possibly. The controversial notion is that at the end of the day, Republicans are being kind of as cynical as you can be when it comes to this. They have decided that Black and brown voters can't be convinced that their policies that, Speaker Mike Johnson and people like, John Thune in South Dakota in the Senate, that they can't convince voters, Black and brown.
What is this? No, he's like he's trying to go back on what he just said. He just said that it shouldn't be controversial to have constitutional maps. Well, if it's not controversial to have constitutional maps, then follow the ruling of the Supreme Court. Then that's the constitutional map that you're going to have. Like, what is he saying? Why is he trying to undermine what Speaker Johnson said there?
And so instead, they're going to draw them out. They're going to make it much more difficult. What can Democrats do at this point? Because we know that Hakeem Jeffries has said, everyone else draw maps, everyone go out and do it. At some point, everyone's going to run out of juice. But Democrats were feeling really good, and they were feeling like they had a lot of wind at their back. How much of the wind does this take out of the sails as Democrats try to take back the House and Senate in November?
Well, first of all, remember, in special elections that we have seen since November of 2024, Democrats are running ahead by double digits. So take a Republican seat where a Republican might have won by 10 points. We're seeing huge swings in state legislative seats. You saw the seat in Florida, the legislative seat where Mar-a-Lago is located, and that was over a 30-point swing in a very short period of time. It's because people have soured on the Republican agenda. People are struggling. Prices are skyrocketing. Housing, food, healthcare.
Okay. Once again, prices are not skyrocketing. This narrative needs to stop. That somehow right now our economy is doing horrible. The people are feeling, not the best right now because Donald Trump's policies have been focused more on foreign policy rather than domestic policy, and the prices of goods, while the prices themselves are not decreasing to the extent that many Americans want them to, the increasing in the prices, the inflation of the prices is significantly decreasing. And that's what the difference needs to, be shown here. And it's very common that the people are just, the independent voters, the voters who aren't very engaged in politics, which is the majority of our country is not very engaged in politics, they're voting based off their immediate impact right now. And Donald Trump needs to give them a reason to vote for Republicans, to keep Republicans in office. As of now, based off the economy, there's no big reason. The only reason that Democrats, would not vote for Democrats would either be because of the tax cuts, which have historically speaking not been enough to keep people from voting from the other party or keeping the incumbent in office, or because of some other domestic effect that Donald Trump has brought, which, to the economy has not been done yet. It doesn't mean it will be done. It doesn't mean it won't be done. I do believe that he will take serious action with the economy, and I think that his tariffs and other things that he has brought already will take some time to get implemented, and the effects will be felt. Positive effects of these will be felt just in some time, but we will have to wait for that in order for it to happen.
Childcare, energy costs, gas prices, all skyrocketing directly because of action.
Okay, so it's also very interesting when they talk about gas prices. They seem so focused on gas prices, but under Biden in 2022, when gas prices were even higher than they are now, under Biden in 2022, when he decided to end all permits for oil and fracking companies in the United States, no one was talking about gas prices. No one was talking about gas prices when Biden took out oil from the oil reserves, not because of some legitimate issue, not because we had a shortage of oil or because we were, there was some other foreign policy issue going at hand, but because Biden wanted to cancel the energy contracts that several fracking companies had in the United States, which is a very illegitimate reason to use. They also talk about oil while half of the EU is still buying oil from Russia, for example. So all of this is just BS. Like, Democrats are just spewing the same talking points, but in reality, when you look at it, they have made things even worse.
of this administration. So it's no surprise that people across the country are rejecting Republicans. We've seen that in special elections. So they redraw these maps thinking they're going to pick up seats. They actually give us opportunities. And we have great candidates who want to run, who feel a patriotic calling to run, folks who are veterans and farmers, mayors, ministers, small business owners who have stand up to run across the country. And, to Mike Johnson's comments, if he cares about, the law, then maybe he'd look, for example, in Florida, where they're trying to change the maps. The people of Florida said they cannot do a political gerrymander, or very clear, and yet I didn't hear him say anything about the attempts of Ron DeSantis to ignore the people of Florida, ignore the amendment they put in place, and they're still trying to redraw maps. So I don't think he's been consistent at all. And we should also remind everyone that the Supreme Court actually upheld new maps in Alabama and in Louisiana just 2 years ago. So how come they changed their mind now?
Congressman, one last point. I know we got.
They didn't. Those maps were completely different. The reason why the Supreme Court specifically now chose to overturn the maps is because this specific case regarding the maps in Louisiana was solely focused on the Voting Rights Act, solely focused on racial gerrymandering. The Supreme Court took a very similar pathway as they did with affirmative action, where they first banned affirmative action in I forget the year. It was in the 80s, I believe. They first banned quotas, racial quotas, which is like a partial ban on affirmative action. And then they only fully banned affirmative action in higher education after, after the 2022 or 2024 ruling, with Harvard. So, they took a very similar case here, which is obviously the original case of banning gerrymandering just solely based off race was Xavi Reno, and now this is a final end to racial gerrymandering.
Gotta go. The future for this effort is in every state legislature in the country, because they are the ones that draw the maps. So the reality is the Congress members don't draw their seats. The state legislature do. You want to change who draws the seats? Change the people who draw the seats.
What did he just say there? I have absolutely no idea. Anyways, guys, please subscribe to this channel, comment down below your thoughts, like this video, and support the channel by commenting and, subscribing. Please, though, comment down below on what you think about the Supreme Court's ruling here. Do you agree with it, or do you think that they should have ruled in some sort of different way? Thank you, guys, and we'll see you next time on Brief America.